Empathy is supposed to be one of the best things about you. The ability to feel what someone else is feeling, to show up for people, to stay when others leave. But here's the part nobody tells you. Your empathy doesn't just help the people around you. It makes you the most precisely targeted person in any room for a specific kind of manipulation. In this video, 4 specific ways your empathy gets weaponized, 3 signs it's happening in a relationship right now, and the empathy budget practice that protects you without making you cold. Highly empathetic people share a specific psychological profile that most of them don't fully recognize in themselves. They feel other people's pain acutely, sometimes more acutely than their own. They have difficulty tolerating conflict because conflict means someone is suffering, and suffering feels personal to them, even when it isn't. They tend to assume responsibility for the emotional states of people around them. If someone is unhappy, there is a part of them that asks, "What did I do? What can I fix?" This orientation toward the world produces extraordinary things. Empathetic people are often the ones who hold communities together, who notice the person at the edge of the room who nobody else saw, who stay up late because someone they love is struggling, who sacrifice consistently, often invisibly, because someone else's need feels more urgent than their own. And it produces a very specific vulnerability, because a person who feels responsible for other people's emotions can be made to feel responsible for emotions they did not cause. A person who cannot tolerate someone else's pain can be made to do almost anything to relieve it. A person whose self-worth is tied to how well they take care of others can be destabilized simply by implying they have failed to do so. You don't need chains to control someone like that. You just need to need them badly enough and make sure they know it. This is the empathy paradox. The more you feel, the more you can be made to carry. And certain people find that irresistible. The most basic manipulation of empathy is the simplest. Perform suffering. Not necessarily fabricate it entirely, though that happens. More often, it's real feelings amplified strategically. Distress displayed at exactly the moment it will produce the most compliance. Vulnerability deployed when a boundary is being set. Tears that arrive precisely when accountability is approaching. For a highly empathetic person, perceived suffering in someone they care about triggers an almost automatic response. Fix it. Relieve it. Do whatever it takes to make it stop. The manipulator doesn't need to threaten or demand. They just need to suffer visibly enough. And the empathetic person will reshape their own behavior, their own limits, their own needs to make the suffering stop. One of the clearest signs this is happening, you notice that a person's distress is curiously well-timed. It tends to arrive when you're about to do something for yourself, when you've just set a limit, when you need something from them. Their pain has a pattern, and the pattern is about your behavior, not their internal state. Guilt is the preferred currency of empathy manipulation because it doesn't require a transaction, it just requires installation. Once a person has been made to feel generally responsible for someone else's well-being, they begin to self-regulate around that responsibility without being asked. They preemptively accommodate, they self-censor, they shrink. The manipulator doesn't need to make demands. The guilt does the work. You know how much I need you right now. I don't know what I'd do without you. After everything I've been through, these statements aren't requests. They're weights being added to a scale that the empathetic person is already trying to keep balanced. The end state is a person who has essentially outsourced their decision-making to another person's emotional state, who cannot make a choice for themselves without running it through the filter of, how will this affect them? Will this hurt them? Am I being selfish? That is not love. That is captivity that feels like love. Empathetic people are naturally good at seeing other perspectives, at holding complexity, at understanding why someone behaved the way they did, even when that behavior hurt them. This is genuinely beautiful. And it is systematically exploited because the manipulator knows that if they can get you to fully inhabit their perspective, to really understand their childhood, their trauma, their fears, their pressures, you will find it very hard to hold them accountable for anything. Because accountability requires judgment, and judgment feels cruel to someone who truly understands why. So they feed you their story in enormous, sympathetic detail. They make sure you understand every reason they are the way they are, every wound that explains every behavior. And you, because you are capable of profound empathy, absorb it all and find yourself defending them to other people, to yourself, using the very empathy that should have been protecting you. You understand them so well that you've stopped understanding yourself. There is a specific dynamic that appears in certain relationships with highly empathetic people, one that is rarely discussed because it is uncomfortable to name. Some empathetic people are drawn to people who need saving, not because they are weak or naive, but because the act of helping activates something real and important in them. It feels like purpose, like meaning, like being exactly who they are supposed to be. A manipulator who recognizes this doesn't need to trap them. They just need to be the most compelling project in the room. They present themselves as broken in exactly the ways the empathetic person knows how to fix. They allow themselves to be helped, partially, just enough to maintain hope. Then they slip back. Then they allow help again. The pattern of progress and relapse creates the same intermittent reinforcement we explored in the obsession video. But here, the dopamine comes not from being loved, but from being needed. The empathetic person stays, not because they're weak, because leaving means abandoning someone who needs them. And that is the one thing they genuinely cannot do. The cage is built from their own best qualities. Empathy fatigue is a clinical reality, documented most extensively in healthcare workers, therapists, and first responders, but experienced by anyone who consistently absorbs and carries other people's emotional weight without replenishment. The symptoms are specific: emotional numbness, a gradual inability to feel what you once felt easily, resentment, often toward the very person you've been caring for, which generates enormous guilt, disconnection from your own needs, because you've been so long focused outward that you've lost the habit of looking inward, physical exhaustion that doesn't lift with rest, a pervasive sense of emptiness where meaning used to be. In a manipulation dynamic, empathy fatigue is not a side effect. It is the intended outcome. Because a person who is emotionally depleted is far easier to manage than a person who is resourced, clear, and grounded in themselves. When you are running on empty, you don't have the energy to question things. You don't have the clarity to recognize patterns. You don't have the reserves to set limits or hold them. You just survive from interaction to interaction. And the person who controls the interactions controls you. If you have been feeling this way, and you recognize the dynamic we've been describing, that exhaustion is not a personal failing. It is evidence of how hard you've been working and how much has been taken. The goal is not to become less empathetic. That would be a different kind of loss and a different kind of damage. The goal is to extend your empathy with more precision, to be discerning about where it goes, rather than making it available to everyone at all times without condition. The first practice: notice the direction of flow. Healthy relationships have empathy moving in both directions. Both people try to understand each other. Both people feel seen. Both people make accommodations. If the flow in your relationship is almost entirely one direction, that is, information, not a temporary imbalance to be patient with. The second practice, distinguish between someone's pain and your responsibility for it. You can fully feel the weight of what someone is going through and still recognize that you are not obligated to fix it. Empathy does not require self-sacrifice. Witnessing someone's pain without resolving it is one of the hardest and most important things an empathetic person can learn to do. The third practice, make your empathy conditional on honesty. Give it freely to people who are honest about what they need and transparent about what they're doing. Withdraw it, not as punishment, but as discernment when it's consistently being misused. Empathy is not an unconditional resource. It is something you choose to offer, and you are allowed to make that choice carefully. And the fourth, fill yourself before others. This is not selfishness. It is maintenance. You cannot give from empty. The most sustainably giving people in the world are not the ones who sacrifice everything. They are the ones who protect enough of themselves to keep going. If this video has described your experience, if you recognized yourself in the guilt, the manufactured suffering, the exhaustion, here is what I want you to know first. What happened to you is not evidence that your empathy is broken. It's evidence that you gave it to someone who treated it as a resource to extract rather than a gift to receive. The first practice is called the empathy budget. Each week, you have a finite amount of emotional energy. Start treating it as a budget rather than an unlimited supply. Not because people don't deserve your care, but because the people who truly deserve it deserve the version of you that still has something left to give. Ask yourself at the start of each week, where's my empathy going? Who is receiving the most of it? And are they the people who have earned it through consistent reciprocal care? The second practice is what therapists call the discomfort pause. The next time you feel the urgent pull to fix someone's emotional state, to say yes when you need to say no, to stay when you need to leave, to give when you're already empty, pause for 60 seconds before acting. The discomfort of that pause is your nervous system recalibrating. It is not evidence that you're being unkind. It is evidence that you're making a choice instead of an automatic response. Third, reconnect with what your empathy feels like when it's freely given. Think of a relationship where caring doesn't cost you, where giving feels like abundance rather than depletion. That feeling is the baseline. If a relationship consistently feels like the opposite of that, that contrast is information, not something to override. Your empathy is one of the most extraordinary things about you. The goal of this video was never to make you feel less of it. It was to help you aim it better. Your empathy is not the problem. Your empathy is one of the most extraordinary things about you. The fact that you feel what others feel, that you show up for people, that you stay, that you try, that is not weakness. It is a form of courage that most people will never fully understand because they don't have the capacity for it. But courage without discernment is just exposure. And you have been exposed. The people who deserve your empathy, truly deserve it, will not need to manufacture suffering to receive it. They will not need to install guilt to keep you. They will not need to weaponize your understanding against your own perception. They will simply be grateful for it, carefully, consistently, reciprocally. That is the relationship your empathy was built for. Don't let anyone convince you it should cost you everything. If this reached you, subscribe and share it with someone who gives too much of themselves. They need to hear this.